Rebecca Chen was 38 years old and worked as a financial analyst in Seattle, Washington. What happened to her sounds like something from a thriller movie, but every word is true. Her husband replaced her life-saving medication with sugar pills. When she collapsed at her office during a crucial client presentation, the paramedic who responded recognized something that would change everything and expose a conspiracy that had been slowly killing her for months. What Rebecca did after she woke up in that hospital bed changed not just her life, but potentially saved dozens of other women from the same fate. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how close she came to becoming a statistic, and how one observant paramedic's medical training caught what everyone else missed. Before the full story unfolds, there's something viewers need to understand. The tactics Rebecca's husband used are being used on women across the country right now. These are warning signs everyone needs to know. The story begins years earlier, at a time when Rebecca thought she had found her soulmate, her partner for life. She thought she knew the man she married. She was so wrong it almost cost her everything. Rebecca met David Chen at a pharmaceutical industry conference in San Francisco 7 years before the collapse. She was 31, he was 34, and honestly, she wasn't looking for romance. She was there representing her firm, analyzing investment opportunities in biotech startups. David was there as a pharmaceutical sales representative for a major medication distributor. Looking back, Rebecca could see how perfectly calculated that meeting was, but at the time, it felt like fate. He approached her during the cocktail reception after the keynote speech. She was standing alone, reviewing her notes on her tablet, when she heard this warm, confident voice beside her. "Analyzing the competition or planning your next investment coup?" he asked with a smile that could light up the entire ballroom. He was tall, well-dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, with dark hair and these incredibly kind brown eyes that seemed genuinely interested when she spoke. They talked for 2 hours straight that night. He asked her about her work, really listened to her answers, asked follow-up questions that showed he was paying attention. He told her about his career in pharmaceutical sales, how he had worked his way up from a small territory to managing major hospital accounts across the Pacific Northwest. He was ambitious but not arrogant, successful but humble. He made her laugh with stories about awkward sales calls and demanding doctors. When the reception ended, he asked if he could take her to dinner the next evening. That dinner turned into a 3-hour conversation at a stunning waterfront restaurant. David was attentive in ways Rebecca had never experienced before. He remembered that she mentioned being lactose intolerant and made sure the restaurant knew. He asked about her family, her childhood in Portland, her dreams beyond finance. He shared stories about growing up as the son of immigrants, how his parents had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities. He spoke about wanting to build a family, create stability, be the kind of husband his father had been to his mother. After the conference ended, they started a long-distance relationship. Every weekend, one of them would fly to see the other. David would surprise Rebecca with flowers delivered to her office. He'd send her thoughtful texts during the day, checking how her meetings went, asking if she'd eaten lunch. He remembered every detail she shared, every preference, every passing comment. When she mentioned loving this specific brand of artisan chocolate, he'd have a box waiting for her on her next visit. 6 months into their relationship, David proposed to Rebecca on a hiking trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge. It was sunset, the sky painted in brilliant oranges and purples, and he got down on one knee right there on the path. "Rebecca, you've made me believe in partnership, in building something real and lasting. I want to spend every day of my life making you as happy as you've made me these past 6 months. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, exactly the style she'd casually mentioned, preferring months before during a window shopping trip. She said yes without hesitation. She thought she'd found everything she'd been looking for, a partner who respected her career, understood her ambitions, and wanted to build a life together as equals. Her parents adored him. Her friends commented on how attentive he was, how lucky she was to find someone so caring. Her mother actually cried with happiness when they told her about the engagement. They got married 10 months later in a beautiful ceremony at a historic mansion in Seattle's Queen Anne neighborhood. It was a perfect September day, sunny but not too hot, with a slight breeze that made the outdoor ceremony comfortable. David had insisted on helping plan every detail. He wanted their wedding to be perfect, he said. He chose the flowers, approved the menu, even helped select Rebecca's dress by coming to appointments and offering opinions. She thought it was sweet how involved he wanted to be. There were 150 guests, a mixture of their families, friends, and professional colleagues. David's boss gave a toast about what an outstanding employee and person David was. Rebecca's best friend Sarah spoke about how she'd never seen Rebecca happier than in the months since she'd met David. During their first dance, David whispered in Rebecca's ear, "I promise to take care of you for the rest of our lives. You'll never have to worry about anything as long as you're with me." Those words would come back to haunt her in ways she never could have imagined. The first 2 years of their marriage were everything Rebecca had dreamed about. They bought a beautiful craftsman-style house in the Wallingford neighborhood. David was thoughtful and romantic. He'd cook dinner for her after long work days, run her baths when she was stressed, massage her shoulders while they watched movies on the couch. He seemed genuinely interested in her career progress, asking about her clients and celebrating her wins. They talked about starting a family. David wanted children within the next few years. They agreed they'd wait until Rebecca made partner at her firm, which was projected to happen within 2 years. He seemed supportive of her timeline, never pressuring her to change her career plans. "Your success is our success," he'd say. "I'm so proud of what you're building." But then, 3 years into their marriage, something changed. Or rather, something Rebecca didn't know about her own body changed everything. During a routine annual physical, her doctor discovered that she had developed a serious autoimmune condition called lupus. It explained the fatigue she'd been experiencing, the joint pain she'd been attributing to stress, the occasional fevers she'd been dismissing as minor bugs. Her rheumatologist, Dr. Patricia Morrison, was concerned but reassuring. "Rebecca, lupus is manageable with proper medication and monitoring. You'll need to take hydroxychloroquine daily along with some supplements. We'll monitor your blood work every 3 months. With medication and lifestyle adjustments, most of my lupus patients live full, normal lives." David was with Rebecca at that appointment. He held her hand, asked Dr. Morrison detailed questions about her prognosis, her medication, potential side effects. He seemed worried but supportive. "We'll get through this together," he told her in the car afterward. "Whatever you need, I'm here. I'll make sure you take your medication on time every day. I'll come to every appointment. You're not facing this alone." Rebecca thought she'd found forever. She thought she had a partner who would stand by her through sickness and health, just like their vows promised. Little did she know that lupus diagnosis had triggered something dark in the man she'd married, something that had perhaps been there all along, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal itself. The first change Rebecca noticed was subtle. About 2 weeks after her diagnosis, David started becoming very controlling about her medication. At first, she thought he was just being helpful and caring. He'd set alarms on his phone to remind her to take her pills. He'd bring her medication with a glass of water every morning and evening, waiting to make sure she took them. "I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself," he'd say with that warm smile she'd fallen in love with. "This medication is serious. You can't miss doses." Rebecca appreciated the attention. Managing a chronic illness while working 60-hour weeks at her firm was overwhelming, and having David help felt like true partnership. But then he started insisting on managing her prescription refills himself. "You're so busy with work, let me handle this," he'd say. He'd pick up her medications from the pharmacy, coordinate with her doctor's office about refill authorizations. When Rebecca offered to do it herself, he'd act hurt. "I'm trying to help you, Rebecca. Why won't you let me take care of you?" She felt guilty for questioning his motives. He seemed so devoted, so concerned about her health. The second incident happened about a month later. Rebecca came home from work early one day with a splitting headache, one of the lupus flare-ups Dr. Morrison had warned her about. She went straight to their bathroom to get her medication from the medicine cabinet. But when she opened the cabinet, her prescription bottles weren't there. Confused, she searched the bathroom, then called out for David, who was working from home that day. He appeared in the bathroom doorway almost immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, his tone sharper than usual. "I can't find my medications. They were right here on the second shelf this morning." "Oh, I moved them," he said casually. "I reorganized the bathroom. Your medications are in the kitchen now, in the cabinet next to the refrigerator. It's more convenient, and I can make sure you're taking them with food like the doctor recommended." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about his tone bothered Rebecca. There was an edge to his voice, almost defensive, like she'd accused him of something. But she dismissed the feeling. She was tired, in pain, probably just being oversensitive. She thanked him and went to the kitchen to get her pills, but the medications weren't in the cabinet he'd indicated. After searching for 5 minutes, she found them in a different cabinet entirely, the one above the stove where they rarely kept anything. When she pointed this out, David seemed irritated. "I told you the wrong cabinet. Sorry, I moved a lot of things around today." But his apology felt forced, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. The third incident was more concerning. About 6 weeks after her diagnosis, Rebecca had a follow-up appointment with Dr. Morrison. Her blood work showed that her lupus wasn't responding as well to the medication as expected. Her inflammation markers were still elevated, and she was still experiencing significant fatigue and joint pain. Dr. Morrison frowned at her test results. "Rebecca, your numbers should be improving by now. Are you taking your hydroxychloroquine consistently? It's crucial that you don't miss doses." "I haven't missed a single dose," Rebecca assured her. "My husband makes sure I take it every morning and evening, like clockwork." Dr. Morrison adjusted her glasses and looked at Rebecca carefully. "How are you feeling overall? Any side effects from the medication? Stomach upset? Vision changes?" Rebecca thought about it. "Actually, no, I haven't had any side effects at all. Is that normal?" "It's not unusual, but most patients experience at least some mild stomach sensitivity initially." Dr. Morrison made notes in her chart. "I'm going to increase your dosage. Maybe you're one of those patients who needs a higher dose to achieve therapeutic levels. Let's monitor you closely over the next month." When Rebecca told David about the dosage increase that evening, his reaction was strange. He seemed almost angry. "Another increase? Are you sure this doctor knows what she's doing? Maybe you should get a second opinion." "David, Dr. Morrison is one of the best rheumatologists in Seattle. My primary care doctor specifically recommended her." "I just don't want you being used as a guinea pig," he snapped. Then he softened, probably noticing Rebecca's shocked expression. "I'm sorry. I'm just worried about you. I hate seeing you go through this." But the damage was done. Rebecca had seen something flash across his face in that moment, something that looked almost like panic. A pattern was emerging, though Rebecca couldn't quite identify it yet. David was becoming increasingly irritable. He'd snap at her over small things, like if she came home later than expected from work, or if she made plans with friends without consulting him first. He'd apologize afterward, blaming stress at his job, but the apologies felt rehearsed. Rebecca's best friend Sarah started noticing the changes too. They'd been friends since college, and she knew Rebecca better than almost anyone. One Saturday, when David was out of town for a work conference, Sarah came over for lunch. They were sitting on Rebecca's back deck, enjoying the rare Seattle sunshine, when she brought it up. "Rebecca, is everything okay with you and David?" Sarah asked carefully, setting down her iced tea. "What do you mean? Everything's fine," Rebecca said automatically. "It's just that you've seemed different lately, more withdrawn, and David's been really controlling about your schedule. Last month, when we tried to plan that girls' weekend in Portland, he acted like it was a huge imposition for you to be gone for 2 days." "He was just worried about my health," Rebecca defended him. "With the lupus, he doesn't want me overdoing it." Sarah looked at Rebecca with concern in her eyes. "Becca, you're one of the strongest people I know. You hiked Mount Rainier before you got diagnosed. A weekend trip to Portland isn't going to break you. I'm just worried that David is being overprotective to the point where it's not healthy." "He's just trying to take care of me," Rebecca insisted. But Sarah's words planted a seed of doubt that she couldn't quite shake. Rebecca's mother noticed something was off too. She called Rebecca one evening after Rebecca and David had dinner at her parents' house. "Sweetheart, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me. Is David treating you well?" The question caught Rebecca off guard. "Of course, Mom. Why would you ask that?" "At dinner tonight, he answered for you 3 times when your father and I asked you direct questions. And when you tried to tell us about that big client win at work, he changed the subject. It just seemed off. Your father noticed it too." "Mom, you're reading too much into it. He was probably just tired." But Rebecca was lying to her mother and to herself. She'd noticed it too. David had been interrupting her more frequently, dismissing her opinions, making decisions without consulting her. Just last week, he'd canceled her subscription to her favorite financial newsletter without asking because he thought she was spending too much time reading industry news instead of focusing on her health. Rebecca told herself she was being paranoid. David loved her. He was worried about her illness. He was trying to help. But deep down, a small voice was whispering that something was wrong, something was very wrong, and she was running out of time to figure out what it was before it was too late. The first major incident happened on a Tuesday morning in late October, about 4 months after Rebecca's lupus diagnosis. She woke up feeling particularly weak, more exhausted than usual despite sleeping 8 hours. Her joints ached, and she had a low-grade fever. David was already up, dressed in one of his expensive suits, preparing for work. "I don't think I can go to the office today," Rebecca told him, her voice hoarse. "I feel terrible." He turned from the mirror where he'd been fixing his tie, and his expression wasn't sympathetic. It was annoyed. "Rebecca, you've been missing a lot of work lately. Don't you think your clients are going to start losing confidence in you?" His words stung. Rebecca had been promoted to senior analyst 2 years ago, specifically because of her reliability and work ethic. "David, I have lupus. Sometimes I have bad days. That's how the disease works." "Maybe if you took your medication more seriously," he said coldly, "you wouldn't have so many bad days." "What are you talking about? I take my medication exactly as prescribed. You literally watch me take it every day." He walked over to the bed. And there was something in his eyes Rebecca had never seen before, something hard and calculating. "Do I? Because your doctor keeps increasing your dosage, which suggests the medication isn't working. Maybe you're not being honest about taking it. Maybe you're throwing it away when I'm not looking." Rebecca felt like she'd been slapped. "Are you seriously suggesting I'm lying about taking medication for a disease that could kill me if left untreated?" "I'm just saying the facts don't add up," he said with a shrug, turning back to the mirror. "But fine, stay home today. I'll tell your office you're sick again." The way he said, "again," dripped with judgment and disappointment. After he left for work, Rebecca lay in bed, too exhausted to move, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't the man she'd married. This wasn't the David who'd promised to support her through sickness and health. Something fundamental had shifted, and she couldn't understand what or why. The psychological manipulation escalated from there. David started commenting on Rebecca's appearance constantly. "You're looking really tired lately," he'd say with fake concern. "Maybe you should wear more makeup to work. You don't want people thinking you can't handle your job." Or, "Have you gained weight? The medication must be affecting your metabolism. You should probably start watching what you eat more carefully." He'd make these comments in front of friends, family, colleagues at social events. At a dinner party hosted by one of Rebecca's work associates, David loudly told the table, "Rebecca's been really struggling with her health lately. I worry about her constantly. She's not herself anymore." Rebecca felt humiliated, reduced to nothing but her illness in front of people she needed to maintain professional relationships with. He started isolating her systematically, and his tactics were insidious because they always came wrapped in concern. When Sarah texted to make plans, David would look at Rebecca's phone over her shoulder and say, "Do you really think going out is a good idea when you're this sick? Sarah will understand if you cancel. A real friend wouldn't want you to overexert yourself." He'd frame it as concern, but it was control. Pure, calculated control. He'd monitor Rebecca's phone constantly, always with an excuse. "I'm just worried about you," he'd say when she caught him scrolling through her messages. "I want to make sure you're not stressing yourself out with work or making plans that are too demanding for your health." But what he was really doing was cutting off her connections to the outside world, one relationship at a time. Rebecca's colleagues at work started commenting on how unavailable she'd become. She'd stopped joining them for lunch, stopped participating in after-work social events. When they invited her, she'd check with David first, and he'd always have a reason why she shouldn't go. "You look exhausted," he'd say. "You need to rest. Your health has to come first." And Rebecca would believe him, because she did feel exhausted all the time, not realizing that the exhaustion was because he was withholding her medication. When Rebecca's parents invited them over for Sunday dinner, David would agree to go but then make them late by taking his time getting ready, or he'd make them leave early by claiming Rebecca looked tired and needed rest. "Rebecca needs to take her medication and get to bed," he'd announce, standing up from the table before dessert was even served. Rebecca's parents would look at her with concern, and she felt powerless to explain that she didn't want to leave, that he was making these decisions without consulting her. The second major incident occurred in mid-November. Rebecca had been asked to lead a crucial presentation for a potential major client, a tech startup looking to go public and seeking financial analysis services. It was a career-defining opportunity. She'd been preparing for weeks, working late nights despite her fatigue. The morning of the presentation, Rebecca took her medication as usual. David handed her the pills with water, watched her swallow them, same routine as every day. But about an hour into her drive to the office, she started feeling strange, dizzy, disoriented, like the world was tilting. She pulled over on the shoulder of Interstate 5, gripping the steering wheel, trying to steady herself. Rebecca called David. "Something's wrong. I don't feel right. I'm dizzy and confused." "You're probably just nervous about the presentation," he said dismissively. "Take some deep breaths. You'll be fine." "David, this isn't nerves. Something's really wrong." "Rebecca, you're being dramatic. You do this every time you have something important at work. You psych yourself out." His voice was sharp, impatient. "Just drive carefully and get to your office. Call me after the presentation." He hung up before Rebecca could respond. She sat there in her car, trucks roaring past on the interstate, feeling abandoned and scared. But she couldn't miss this presentation. She'd worked too hard. Her team was counting on her. So she took deep breaths, waited until the dizziness subsided a bit, and continued driving. Rebecca made it through the presentation, though she didn't remember much of it. She operated on autopilot, relying on months of preparation. Her colleague James later told her she did well, but she could see concern in his eyes. "Are you feeling okay, Rebecca? You seemed a little off today." The third incident was the worst. It happened on a Friday evening in early December. Rebecca and David had been invited to his company's holiday party at an upscale hotel in downtown Seattle. Rebecca didn't want to go. She'd been feeling progressively worse over the past weeks despite her increased medication dosage. Her fatigue was overwhelming. She had constant joint pain, and she'd developed a persistent rash on her face that Dr. Morrison said was concerning. But David insisted they attend. "My boss will be there. It's important for my career that you come and show you're supportive." When Rebecca hesitated, his expression darkened. "Rebecca, I've sacrificed a lot to take care of you through this illness. The least you can do is support my career for one evening." The guilt trip worked. Rebecca got dressed, applied heavy makeup to cover the rash, and went to the party. Within 30 minutes of arriving, she felt violently ill. The room was spinning, she was sweating profusely, and her heart was racing. She found David talking to his boss and touched his arm. "David, I need to go home. I feel really sick." He looked at her with barely concealed anger. "Can you please just hold it together for one evening?" he hissed under his breath. Then louder to his boss, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Patterson. Rebecca hasn't been feeling well lately. Her condition has been really challenging for both of us." Rebecca stumbled away, humiliated, and found the bathroom. She barely made it into a stall before she started vomiting. When she emerged, shaking and pale, a woman she didn't know was standing at the sinks, looking at her with concern. "Honey, are you okay? Should I call someone?" "I'm fine," Rebecca lied, washing her face with cold water. "Just a bug." But Rebecca wasn't fine, and she was finally starting to realize that this wasn't just about lupus. Something else was happening to her, something beyond her autoimmune disease, and the man she'd trusted most in the world was somehow at the center of it. If this story resonates with anyone watching, if they've ever felt gaslit by someone who claims to love them, their support helps more people find this story, and maybe Rebecca's experience can help someone else recognize the warning signs before it's too late. The isolation David had created around Rebecca was nearly complete. She'd stopped making plans with Sarah because David's disapproval wasn't worth the fight. She'd been avoiding her parents because seeing the concern in their eyes made her feel like a failure. At work, she was barely hanging on, her performance slipping, missing deadlines for the first time in her career. Her colleagues had stopped inviting her to after-work drinks or lunch meetings. She'd become invisible, a ghost of the person she used to be. And through it all, David was there, controlling every aspect of Rebecca's life under the guise of being a devoted, concerned husband. He managed her medications, her doctor appointments, her schedule, her social interactions. He'd systematically destroyed her confidence, her independence, her sense of self. Rebecca was completely dependent on him, exactly where he wanted her. The worst part was that she'd let it happen. She'd allowed him to convince her that she was incapable of managing her own life, that she was sick and weak and needed him to survive. The strong, confident financial analyst who'd hiked mountains and closed multi-million-dollar deals had been reduced to someone who couldn't even leave the house without her husband's permission. Looking back, Rebecca could see how methodically he'd executed his plan. But at the time, trapped in the fog of manipulation and what she thought was illness, she couldn't see the truth that was right in front of her. She was dying, slowly but surely, and the man who'd promised to love and protect her was the one holding the weapon. The moment that changed everything happened on a Thursday afternoon in mid-December. Rebecca was at work, struggling through a financial analysis report that should have taken her 2 hours but was taking all day because she couldn't focus. The exhaustion was overwhelming, worse than ever before. Her hands were shaking as she tried to type. Her vision kept blurring. She felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, disconnected and detached. She was in the middle of a video conference call with a client when it happened. She was explaining their quarterly projections when suddenly she couldn't remember what she was saying. The words just stopped. She stared at the screen, at the client's confused face, and her mouth wouldn't form sentences. Her heart started racing, pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. "Ms. Chen, Rebecca, are you there?" The client's voice sounded distant, like they were speaking underwater. Rebecca tried to stand up to excuse herself, but her legs wouldn't work. The room tilted violently to one side. She heard her colleague James shout something, saw him running toward her, and then everything went dark. She collapsed right there in her office, during a client call in front of half her team. Later, James told her it was terrifying. One moment she was speaking, and the next she was unconscious on the floor, her body convulsing. He immediately called 911. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes. There was a team of 2. an older male paramedic named Tom and a younger woman named Rebecca, ironically. They worked quickly, checking her vitals, asking James questions about what happened, what medications she was on, whether she had any known conditions. "She has lupus," James told them, his voice shaking. "She's been on medication for it for a few months. She's been looking really sick lately, but she insisted she was fine." The female paramedic, Rebecca, started an IV while Tom checked her blood pressure and heart rate. "BP is low, heart rate elevated. We need to get her to Harborview," Tom said. But here's where everything changed. As they were preparing to transport her, Rebecca noticed something. She'd been going through the unconscious woman's purse, looking for her ID and insurance information, when she found the medication bottles. There were 3 of them: hydroxychloroquine for lupus, a vitamin D supplement, and a multivitamin. Rebecca opened the hydroxychloroquine bottle and poured a few pills into her gloved hand. She stared at them for a long moment, then looked at the prescription label, then back at the pills. Her expression changed from professional concern to something else: suspicion. "Tom," she said quietly, her voice tense. "Look at these." Tom came over and examined the pills. They looked at each other, and the unconscious Rebecca could see something passing between them, some unspoken medical knowledge that she wasn't privy to in her semi-conscious state. "These aren't hydroxychloroquine," Rebecca said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "These are glucose tablets, sugar pills." Even in her compromised state, those words penetrated Rebecca Chen's consciousness. Sugar pills, not her medication. Sugar pills. Tom immediately pulled out his phone and took pictures of the pills and the prescription bottle. "This is evidence of medical fraud at minimum, possibly attempted murder," he said grimly. "We need to get her to the hospital now and report this to the police." In the ambulance, as they monitored her vitals and administered emergency fluids, Rebecca held the patient's hand. The woman was drifting in and out of consciousness, but she heard the paramedic's voice, firm and reassuring. "Rebecca, I don't know your situation, but I need you to listen to me. Someone has been replacing your medication with sugar pills. Your lupus has been untreated for months. That's why you collapsed. You're in danger, but we've got you now. You're going to be okay." That's when the full horror of what had been happening crashed over Rebecca. David. David had been replacing her medication every morning and evening when he'd handed her those pills, watching her swallow them, ensuring she never missed a dose. He'd been systematically poisoning her by withholding the medication that was keeping her alive. The evidence was there in the pill bottles themselves. David had been picking up her prescriptions from the pharmacy. He'd been the one managing all her medications. He'd reorganized where they were kept, moved them to different locations, always keeping them under his control. He'd never let her handle her own refills, never let her see the actual pharmacy bags or receipt. And then Rebecca remembered something else, something that made her blood run cold despite the fever burning through her body. About 2 months ago, David had taken out a life insurance policy on her. He'd presented it as being responsible, planning for the future. "With your medical condition, we need to make sure we're protected," he'd said. She'd signed the papers without really reading them, trusting him, believing he had their best interests at heart. The life insurance policy was for $2 million, with David as the sole beneficiary. In the hospital emergency room, as doctors worked to stabilize her and treat the lupus flare that had nearly killed her, Rebecca told them everything. A hospital social worker was called. The police were notified. The paramedic, Rebecca, had already filed a report and turned over the pill bottles as evidence. Dr. Morrison arrived at the hospital within an hour of being notified. She was visibly upset, almost in tears when she saw Rebecca. "Rebecca, I am so sorry. I should have realized something was wrong when your blood work kept showing no improvement despite increasing dosages. I should have asked more questions." "It's not your fault," Rebecca told her, her voice weak but steady. "He fooled everyone. He was so careful, so convincing." The hospital ran extensive tests. Rebecca's lupus had progressed significantly during the months without proper medication. She had damage to her kidneys, inflammation in her heart, and dangerous levels of various markers that indicated her body had been under siege. Without treatment, she would have died within weeks, maybe days. The collapse at work had likely saved her life by forcing the medical intervention she desperately needed. The full truth was devastating, but also clarifying. Her husband, the man she'd loved and trusted, the man who'd promised to cherish and protect her, had been slowly killing her for months. Every loving gesture, every show of concern, every time he'd handed her medication and ensured she took it, he'd been executing a plan to murder her and collect the insurance money. Rebecca spent 3 days in the hospital while doctors stabilized her condition and started her on proper medication regimens, this time administered by nurses and documented meticulously. During those 3 days, she made a decision that would define the rest of her life. She was going to fight back, and she was going to make sure David paid for what he'd done to her. The police detective assigned to her case was a woman named Maria Gonzalez. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and thorough, and she took Rebecca's case personally. "Mrs. Chen, I want you to know that I believe you, and we're going to build a case against your husband that will ensure he never hurts anyone again," she told Rebecca on her first visit to the hospital room. Detective Gonzalez explained that they'd already begun investigating. The pharmacist who'd filled Rebecca's prescriptions confirmed that they'd dispensed the correct medication. They had records showing David had picked up the prescriptions himself every month. The pills in Rebecca's bottle, confirmed by lab testing, were indeed glucose tablets available at any drugstore. Someone had carefully opened her prescription bottles and replaced the real medication with convincing fakes. But gathering evidence for criminal charges required more than just the switched pills. They needed to prove that David had been the one to do the switching, that it was intentional, and ideally, they needed to understand his motive and planning. That's where Rebecca's hidden advantage came into play. She worked in finance. She was trained to analyze patterns, track money, and identify fraud. And she had access to all of their financial records because she'd always managed their household finances. David had never paid much attention to their bank statements or credit card bills, leaving those boring details to Rebecca. From her hospital bed, using her laptop, Rebecca started digging through their financial history, and what she found was damning. David had been researching this for months before her lupus diagnosis. Rebecca found credit card charges for books on autoimmune diseases, purchased 7 months before her diagnosis, charges for consultations with what looked like pharmaceutical forums and websites. He'd been preparing, learning, waiting for an opportunity. After her diagnosis, the evidence became even clearer. Multiple purchases at drugstores for glucose tablets, always paid with cash withdrawn from their account. He'd been careful not to use credit cards for those purchases, but he had to get the cash from somewhere. Rebecca found ATM withdrawals, always small amounts, always at locations near pharmacies. Then she found the life insurance policy paperwork in their home files, which her best friend Sarah had retrieved for her with a spare key Rebecca had given her years ago. David had taken out the policy 2 weeks after her lupus diagnosis. The premium payments were coming directly from his personal checking account, which Rebecca didn't usually monitor because they kept separate accounts for personal spending. But the most damning evidence was something Rebecca found in David's email. Sarah had also retrieved Rebecca's personal laptop from home, and she remembered that David and she had each other's email passwords for convenience and transparency in their marriage. Rebecca logged into his account, feeling guilty for about 2 seconds before remembering that he'd been trying to murder her. What she found in his emails destroyed any remaining doubt she might have had. There was a correspondence with a woman named Jessica, someone he'd met at a pharmaceutical conference 2 years ago. They'd been having an affair for almost 2 years, long before Rebecca's lupus diagnosis. In their emails, they discussed Rebecca, discussed her illness, discussed how convenient it would be if she didn't recover. In one email sent 3 weeks after Rebecca's diagnosis, David had written, "The doctor said without proper treatment, lupus can be fatal. She's so busy with work that she's completely dependent on me to manage her medications. This could actually work out perfectly. $2 million is enough to start our new life together." Jessica had responded, "Are you sure? What if someone finds out?" David's reply, "No one will suspect anything. She's legitimately sick. When she dies, it'll just look like the disease progressed. I'll be the devastated widower. We just need to be patient." Rebecca printed every email. She documented every financial transaction. She created spreadsheets showing the pattern of purchases, the timeline of events, the life insurance policy, everything. This was her skill set: analyzing financial fraud, building airtight cases with documentation and evidence. David had chosen the wrong wife to try to murder. Detective Gonzalez was impressed when Rebecca presented her with the findings. "Mrs. Chen, this is exceptional work. With this evidence, combined with the physical evidence of the switched medications and your medical records, we have a strong case for attempted murder and insurance fraud." But Rebecca wanted more than just a criminal case. She wanted David to face consequences on every level: legal, financial, social, professional. She contacted a divorce attorney, one of the best in Seattle. Her name was Elizabeth Park, and she had a reputation for demolishing abusive spouses in court. "I want everything," Rebecca told Elizabeth during their consultation. "I want the house. I want compensation for what he did to me. I want his reputation destroyed so thoroughly that he'll never work in pharmaceutical sales again." Elizabeth smiled grimly. "We can do that. With criminal charges pending and this evidence of his conspiracy to murder you for insurance money, we can make a strong case that all marital assets should go to you. We'll also pursue damages for emotional distress, medical costs, lost wages, everything." Rebecca's final ally was unexpected: David's own mother. Mrs. Chen was a traditional woman who'd always treated Rebecca with kindness. Rebecca had been hesitant to involve her, but Detective Gonzalez suggested it. "Sometimes family members know more than we realize," she said. When Rebecca called Mrs. Chen and told her what David had done, there was a long silence on the phone. Then she said, in a quiet, firm voice, "Rebecca, I'm not surprised. I'm ashamed to say this, but I'm not surprised." She explained that David had always been manipulative, even as a child. He'd stolen money from her purse and lied about it. He'd sabotaged his sister's college applications because he didn't want her to succeed. There had been an incident with a previous girlfriend who'd mysteriously gotten very sick before they broke up. Mrs. Chen had suspected something then, but had convinced herself she was being paranoid. "I will testify against my son if needed," she told Rebecca. "What he did to you is unforgivable. My grandson deserves better than a murderer for a father." Rebecca hadn't even known she thought of their potential future children that way, and her words brought tears to her eyes. The trap was set. They had the evidence, the witnesses, the legal team. Now they just needed the perfect moment for the confrontation, and Rebecca knew exactly when and where it should happen. David didn't know Rebecca was alive. That was part of the plan. After her collapse at work and hospitalization, Rebecca had instructed the hospital to tell David, when he called, that she was in critical condition and couldn't have visitors due to the severity of her medical crisis. She'd also blocked his number on her phone and had her colleagues tell him they had no information about her condition. He'd called the hospital twice, according to the records. Both times he'd asked about her condition with what the nurses described as appropriate concern. But he hadn't pushed hard to visit, hadn't shown up at the hospital demanding to see his wife. That told Rebecca everything she needed to know. He was waiting for news of her death, trying to maintain the appearance of a worried husband while avoiding actually seeing her and having to pretend to care. Detective Gonzalez arranged for the confrontation to happen at the courthouse, in a formal setting where David would be surrounded by authority and unable to escape or lie his way out of consequences. They scheduled a hearing for the restraining order Rebecca had filed against him, which required him to appear in person. The morning of the hearing, Rebecca dressed carefully. She wore a navy blue suit that she'd always felt confident in, did her makeup to look healthy and strong, not like the sick, weak woman David had been conditioning her to believe she was. Elizabeth Park had coached her on how to present herself. "You're not a victim today," she'd said. "You're a survivor who's taking her power back." The courtroom was smaller than Rebecca had expected, wood-paneled and formal. Detective Gonzalez was there, along with 2 uniformed police officers. Elizabeth Park sat beside Rebecca at the plaintiff's table. Her parents were in the gallery, along with Sarah, and surprisingly, David's mother, Mrs. Chen. The female paramedic, Rebecca, was there to testify. Her rheumatologist, Dr. Morrison, had submitted a written statement and was available by video if needed. David walked into the courtroom with his attorney, a slick-looking man in an expensive suit. David looked good, well-rested, dressed impeccably. He'd gotten a haircut recently. He looked like a successful, respectable businessman, which was exactly what he wanted everyone to see. His expression when he saw Rebecca sitting at the plaintiff's table was worth everything she'd been through. His face went white. His eyes widened in shock. His mouth actually dropped open. He'd thought she was dying. He'd been waiting for the hospital to call and tell him she was dead. Seeing her sitting there, alive and clearly prepared for battle, short-circuited his brain for a moment. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Everyone in that courtroom had seen his reaction. Not relief that his wife was alive, not joy or concern, just shock and something that looked a lot like fear. The judge, Honorable Patricia Williams, called the hearing to order. She was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "We're here today regarding a restraining order petition filed by Rebecca Chen against her husband, David Chen," Judge Williams began. "Mrs. Chen, I've reviewed your petition and the supporting evidence. This is quite serious. Would you like to make a statement?" Rebecca stood up, Elizabeth Park beside her. Her voice was steady and strong, nothing like the weak, sick woman David had tried to create. "Your Honor, my husband attempted to murder me by systematically replacing my life-saving lupus medication with sugar pills over a period of 4 months. He did this to collect a $2 million life insurance policy he'd taken out on me after my diagnosis. I have evidence of his actions, his planning, and his conspiracy with his mistress." The courtroom was silent. David's attorney started to object, but Judge Williams held up her hand. "I've seen the evidence submitted with the petition. Mr. Chen, you'll have your opportunity to respond, but first, I want to hear from the witnesses." Rebecca, the paramedic, testified first. She explained how she'd found the sugar pills in the prescription bottle, how they were completely different from what hydroxychloroquine should look like, how she'd immediately recognized that the patient's medical crisis was caused by untreated lupus, not lupus that was treatment-resistant. "In my 12 years as a paramedic, I've never seen anything like this," Rebecca testified, her voice firm. "Someone deliberately replaced medication that was keeping this woman alive. Without intervention, she would have died within days, maybe a week at most." Detective Gonzalez testified next, presenting the evidence they'd gathered. The financial records showing purchases of glucose tablets, the emails between David and his mistress Jessica discussing Rebecca's illness and the insurance money, the life insurance policy taken out after the diagnosis, the pharmacy records showing he'd picked up the legitimate prescriptions that were then switched out for fakes. When Detective Gonzalez read the emails aloud, Rebecca watched David's face. He was trying to maintain his composure, but sweat was beading on his forehead. His attorney kept whispering urgently to him, probably telling him not to react, but David looked like a cornered animal. The most powerful testimony came from David's mother. She took the stand with quiet dignity and looked directly at her son. The bailiff swore her in, and she placed her hand on the Bible with steady hands, though tears were already forming in her eyes. "I raised you better than this," she said, her voice breaking but still strong. "Rebecca has been nothing but a kind, loving daughter-in-law to me. She included me in your lives, invited me to holidays, respected our traditions, learned to cook our family recipes so I would feel at home in your house. She treated me with kindness and respect from the day you introduced us, and you repaid her by trying to kill her for money. For money, David. For an insurance payout." She paused, wiping her eyes. "I am ashamed to call you my son. I am ashamed that I didn't see what you were becoming, but I see it now, and I will do everything in my power to make sure Rebecca gets the justice she deserves." The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, caught up in the raw emotion of a mother testifying against her own child. David sat frozen, his face pale, staring at his mother as if she'd physically struck him. David actually flinched. Seeing his mother testify against him, seeing the disappointment and disgust in her eyes, broke through his carefully maintained facade. For the first time since Rebecca had met him 7 years ago, she saw something real on his face. Shame. Pure, undiluted shame. His expensive suit, his practiced composure, his charming smile, none of it could protect him from his mother's condemnation. Judge Williams turned to David. "Mr. Chen, do you have anything to say in your defense?" David's attorney stood up. "Your Honor, my client maintains his innocence. This is a misunderstanding. Mr. Chen was trying to help his wife manage her medications. If there was a mix-up with the pills, it was accidental, not intentional." "A mix-up?" Judge Williams said incredulously. "Your client exchanged prescription medication for sugar pills in bottles that still had the original prescription labels. He did this repeatedly over 4 months. He purchased the sugar pills with cash to avoid leaving a paper trail. He took out a $2 million life insurance policy on his wife shortly after her diagnosis. He discussed her potential death and the insurance payout in emails to his mistress. This wasn't a mix-up. This was attempted murder." She looked at David with unconcealed contempt. "Mr. Chen, I'm granting the restraining order. You are to have no contact with Mrs. Chen whatsoever. Detective Gonzalez, are there criminal charges pending?" "Yes, Your Honor. We're filing charges of attempted murder, insurance fraud, and endangerment. Mr. Chen will be arrested as he leaves this courtroom." The 2 uniformed officers moved toward David. His attorney tried to negotiate bail terms, but Judge Williams was having none of it. Given the severity of the charges and the evidence of premeditation, bail is denied. Mr. Chen poses a clear danger to his wife. He'll remain in custody pending trial. As the officers handcuffed David, he finally looked at Rebecca. Really looked at her. "Rebecca," he said, his voice desperate, "please. This is all a misunderstanding. I love you. I was trying to help you." Rebecca stood up and walked closer to him, Elizabeth Park right beside her. She looked him in the eyes and spoke clearly so everyone in the courtroom could hear. "You don't love me. You never loved me. You saw me as an opportunity, a target, a victim. But you made one crucial mistake, David. You underestimated me. You thought that making me sick would make me weak, that I'd be too ill to think clearly, too dependent on you to question anything. You forgot that I'm a financial analyst. I'm trained to identify fraud, to follow money trails, to build evidence-based cases. You tried to kill the wrong woman." The officers led him away. As he passed his mother, he tried to speak to her, but she turned her face away from him. That rejection seemed to hurt him more than anything else that had happened in that courtroom. When the doors closed behind David, Rebecca felt something release in her chest, like she'd been holding her breath for months and could finally exhale. Judge Williams looked at her with something like respect. "Mrs. Chen, you're remarkably strong. I hope you recover fully from this ordeal, both physically and emotionally. This court stands adjourned." The legal consequences came swiftly and comprehensively. David was charged with attempted murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, and several counts of endangerment and abuse. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a woman named Jennifer Torres, was determined to make an example of him. "Cases like this are more common than people realize," she told Rebecca during one of their preparation meetings. "Abusers tampering with their partner's medications, slowly poisoning them, making it look like natural illness. But we rarely get evidence this clear. Your documentation is going to help us put him away for a very long time." The trial lasted 3 weeks. David's attorney tried every defense strategy. It was an accident, Rebecca had mental health issues and was making false accusations, she had tampered with her own medications to frame him. But every defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. The emails to his mistress Jessica were particularly damning. She'd been arrested as an accessory and agreed to testify against David in exchange for a reduced sentence. On the stand, Jessica confirmed everything. She and David had been planning a life together, but they needed money. When Rebecca was diagnosed with lupus, David saw an opportunity. Jessica testified that David had told her exactly how he'd been switching the medications, how he'd researched lethal doses and disease progression, how he'd calculated the timeline for when Rebecca would become sick enough to die. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. At sentencing, Judge Williams showed no mercy. "Mr. Chen, you committed one of the most heinous betrayals imaginable. You took advantage of your wife's trust, her vulnerability during illness, and her love for you to attempt to murder her slowly and painfully. The premeditation and calculation you showed demonstrates a complete lack of empathy or conscience. I'm sentencing you to 25 years in state prison without the possibility of parole for the first 15 years. The financial consequences were equally satisfying. Elizabeth Park, Rebecca's divorce attorney, filed for divorce the day after David's arrest. With his criminal conviction, the divorce proceedings were straightforward. Everything was granted in Rebecca's favor. She got the house, all their joint assets, his retirement accounts, everything. The court also awarded her damages for emotional distress, medical costs from the harm he'd caused, and lost wages from the work she'd missed while he was slowly killing her. The total came to over $3 million once all his assets were liquidated. The life insurance company immediately voided the policy when the attempted murder charges were filed. But they also cooperated fully with the investigation and actually sent Rebecca a letter apologizing that their policy had been used in an attempt on her life. But beyond the money, Elizabeth had included provisions in the divorce agreement that gave Rebecca something even more valuable. David was required to forfeit any rights to his pharmaceutical sales license. Every professional organization and licensing board in the healthcare and pharmaceutical industries was notified of his conviction. His career, the thing he'd prided himself on, was destroyed completely and permanently. He'd never work in healthcare again. The social consequences rippled through his entire life. His employer, the pharmaceutical company he'd worked for, issued a press release condemning his actions and emphasizing their commitment to patient safety. They donated money to lupus research organizations in Rebecca's name. David's professional contacts, his colleagues, his friends, all distanced themselves immediately. No one wanted to be associated with a man who'd tried to kill his wife for insurance money. His family, to their credit, stood by Rebecca instead of him. David's mother, Mrs. Chen, actually apologized to Rebecca with tears in her eyes. "I should have seen what he was capable of," she said. "I should have protected you." Rebecca told her it wasn't her fault, that David had fooled everyone. Mrs. Chen insisted on giving Rebecca family jewelry that had been passed down through generations, saying she deserved it more than her son ever would. As for Rebecca, her recovery was long but ultimately successful. With proper medication and care from Dr. Morrison, her lupus symptoms improved dramatically. The damage to her kidneys and heart healed over time. 6 months after David's arrest, Dr. Morrison told her that her lupus was in complete remission. "Rebecca, your blood work looks excellent. Your inflammation markers are normal. If you continue taking your medications as prescribed and maintain regular monitoring, I see no reason you can't live a completely normal, healthy life." Those words meant everything to Rebecca. David had tried to take her life, her health, her future, and she'd taken them all back. Her career recovered too. Her firm had been incredibly supportive throughout the ordeal. When she was ready to return to work, they offered her a flexible schedule and whatever accommodations she needed. Her managing partner, Robert Chen, no relation to David thankfully, called her personally. "Rebecca, take all the time you need. When you're ready to come back, we'll make it work around your health and recovery. Your position is secure, and frankly, the way you documented evidence and built your case against your husband showed exactly why we value you so much. That's the kind of analytical thinking we need." Within a year, Rebecca was back to her full workload. Her colleagues treated her with respect and admiration rather than pity. They'd seen her fight back, seen her use her skills to save her own life, and it had earned her a different kind of credibility. She wasn't the sick woman who couldn't keep up anymore. She was the survivor who'd outsmarted a would-be murderer. She was promoted to managing director 18 months after returning to work. The client she'd collapsed in front of during that video conference, a tech CEO named Michael, actually reached out personally when he heard she was recovering. "Rebecca, I want you to know that your strength through this ordeal has impressed me beyond words. When I'm ready to take my company public, I want you specifically handling the financial analysis. The way you fought back shows the kind of tenacity and intelligence I want on my team." That endorsement led to other high-profile clients. Rebecca's reputation in the financial industry actually grew because of what she'd survived. She wasn't just a good analyst, she was someone who could handle extreme pressure, who could think clearly in crisis, who could build airtight cases with evidence and documentation. Rebecca bought a new house, a beautiful modern home in the Ballard neighborhood with large windows that filled every room with light. It had floor-to-ceiling windows in the living room overlooking Puget Sound, a chef's kitchen with marble countertops that she'd chosen herself, and a home office with custom built-in shelves where she displayed not just her professional achievements, but also photos of the life she was building. She decorated it exactly how she wanted, with no input from anyone else, no compromises, no second-guessing whether David would approve of her choices. It was her sanctuary, her fresh start, her proof that she'd survived and thrived. Looking back 2 years after that courtroom confrontation, Rebecca had learned profound lessons about trust, strength, and the importance of listening to instincts. The red flags were there from the beginning, subtle but present. David's need to control, his isolation tactics, his way of making her doubt herself. She dismissed those signs because she loved him, because she'd made vows, because she thought love was supposed to require sacrifice and compromise, but love should never require someone to sacrifice their safety, their health, or their sense of self. Real love supports, strengthens, respects autonomy. What David felt for Rebecca wasn't love. It was ownership, control, and ultimately, a willingness to destroy her for his own benefit. The healing journey has been challenging. Rebecca worked with an excellent therapist who specialized in trauma and betrayal. She helped Rebecca process the psychological damage David had done, the ways he'd systematically undermined her confidence and independence. She helped Rebecca understand that his abuse wasn't her fault, that she didn't let it happen by being trusting or loving. He was a skilled manipulator who targeted her deliberately. Rebecca learned to trust herself again, to listen to that inner voice that whispers warnings when something doesn't feel right. She rebuilt her relationships with family and friends, apologizing for withdrawing and explaining what she'd been going through. They surrounded her with love and support that she's still grateful for every single day. She also became an advocate for others experiencing medical abuse and domestic violence. She speaks at conferences, sharing her story to help healthcare providers recognize the signs of medication tampering. She volunteers with domestic violence organizations, helping survivors navigate the legal system and rebuild their lives. If her nightmare can prevent even one person from suffering the same fate, then something good has come from the horror. To anyone who sees themselves in this story, who's with someone who controls them, isolates them, makes them doubt their own perceptions, they're not crazy, they're not weak, they're not being overly sensitive. Trust your instincts, document everything, reach out for help. There are people who will believe you, who will support you, who will help you escape. Everyone deserves a partner who celebrates their strength, not someone who tries to destroy it. Everyone deserves a love that builds them up, not tears them down. Everyone deserves to be safe in their own home, confident in their own abilities, certain of their own worth. Rebecca survived because one observant paramedic noticed something wrong and refused to dismiss it. She survived because she used her professional skills to gather evidence. She survived because she had people who believed her and supported her. But most importantly, she survived because she refused to let David's betrayal define or destroy her. Thank you for listening to Rebecca's story. If this resonated with you, please share this story so more people can recognize the warning signs. Remember, you're stronger than you know, and you deserve better than anyone who makes you forget that. This is Rebecca Chen's story of survival.